this is talk originated in probably about 1928, sorry, 2000. That's a good start, isn't it, eh? 2008, 2009.
Please carry on.
Oh, thought I was getting advice there for a minute. So. And it came about, I guess, for a mixture of reasons, one of which is a very simple reason in that lots of people get going on 10 gigahertz with very simple equipment, often gun oscillators and things like that. But knowing where they are in terms of frequency was always an issue, and then you had a big calibration exercise, etc. So there was a lot of requests for some means of producing a simple transmitter that was synthesized, I guess. Thought about a complicated design and all the rest of it, and then somebody came up with the concept of using the phase lock capability of these very simple Comtech transmitters. So we looked at that in a bit more detail. Obviously, we needed the source, which is this device. There's this little can. I'll pass this round whilst I'm talking about, so you can have a look at it on the way around. Which has got all the work done for us, little Far East source, 4 meg reference in it, and it covered basically the 13 centimeter band, which was not really what we wanted for multiplying up to 10 gigahertz. So a very kind gentleman, GAG0GMK, no longer with us unfortunately, sat down and wrote a pick which had all the frequencies in that we were interested in. And there's a little selector down here which dials up the channel that you want. It is basically a video transmitter, though more recently I've just been switching off the subcarrier and just using it as a synthesized signal generator all the way up through 10G, and I use it as a source for a tracking generator, and it made the job very easily, very easy. Got video, 2 audios if you want, although we normally knock off one of the sound subcarriers, so well, we just don't need 2 subcarriers anyway, so we just use a 6 meg one which fits in with all the previous 23 SEMS analog equipment that you've probably got stashed away in the hopefully not in the bottom drawer, but there you go. About 8 to 10 milliwatts out. Well, it depends which one you buy. I think you can buy one that's got a much higher output, but you don't really need that for this project. 12 volts here. It's actually, you need a good 12 volts for these. Really, you need more like 14 because that's a 12 volt regulator, and even a low headroom one, which not necessarily all of them are fitted with. You don't get enough VCO swing in order to cover the upper part. And we're shifting the band up a bit, up to about 2618, which is obviously a fair bit well above the 13 centimeter band. So we've got a nice device, and I'll talk a little bit about what synthesizer channels we put in. That's just a summary of the things that I've just been talking about. We had to make a decision how to use the dip switch. In fact, we got a request from quite a number of people to say, well, could we just dial up the regularly used channels on the repeaters or repeater inputs on 10G? So we did that. We created it Dave put it into 2 sections, and literally the first 7 settings, in other words, you set number 1 and you get the first channel, or channel 3 or channel 4. So it's a button, as it were, per frequency, which a lot of people use. We reserved the bit 8, or the dip switch number 8, and if you put it into that mode, then it goes into producing a 10 meg raster of frequencies all the way through. And there's a little sheet here which we'll talk about again later. One of the slight problems is that we haven't got all the band. I don't know if everybody realises that, but there's a bit in the middle which the gentleman in blue used, and a few others I think. And as you heard yesterday, they'd quite like to have a bit more. So it may well be that the bit below, it's 10250, wasn't it? So we might lose all the bit from 10250 to 10G. But at the moment, we've got quite a lot of repeater inputs. Is yours on 065? Is it, Rob, on yours? Or what? Yeah, it's on, yeah, sorry. Oh, Terry's are, yes. And I think most others are, and there's a few that are reversed around the country. But the number of 10G inputs, of course, has increased quite a bit on... is that my cue? Has increased quite a bit. So quite a few repeat. And we're going to talk a little bit about an exercise that we tried on the South Coast also to introduce 10G onto the input. Well, so we got a source. Nicely lined up. Don't have to worry about the frequency. Just dial it up and you know where you are. So you've got your reference points. We wanted some sort of multiplier times 4 from the 2.5G bit here. We assumed that most of these will be the 8 milliwatt version of this. So we organised it to do that. And John, call sign many of you will be familiar with up to about 40 to 50 milliwatts. So that was quite a useful power level, and indeed many people just use that. I myself could. The key issue is they're all very small. If you see the unit that's coming around, you're talking about something that ends up in a box this big, and the reason for that we were aiming at you being able to say, well, I'll put the whole lot up the mast, because you didn't want any getting into feeder runs and losses and all the rest of it. And with it was it's an interesting occupation, but it doesn't get you very far. So the idea was being able to put this whole lot in a box up the top of the mast. Okay, that means you've got to feed video and audio up and some 12 volts, but that's not a difficult thing to do, and you're not talking about large amounts of power. So we managed to achieve, you obviously need some sort of transition to an antenna, and I've got a sample of a unit. Kevin, if you've got the energy whilst I'm talking to take a unit out of that box, I'd be grateful. Okay. So John went off and made them. First of all, he had a prototype. It was a homemade board, and it was on Duroid, and boy did he struggle in getting the filter right. And I didn't realise till much later how much time and effort he did put into doing that. You can see this one's a prototype. It's got some tabs on the unit. This filter is not the easiest thing in the world to do from a commercial point of view. Thank you. It's not the easiest thing in the world to put together. These other elements are pretty straightforward bits of technology, so there's no great issue in producing those. Anyway, he produced them. He made a batch of, I think, about 5 or 6, and those people who were particularly interested got hold of those. It looked as though it wasn't that viable to produce a lot more. We'd actually have to go through the process of doing a proper manufacturing board for it to be something that we could distribute. And we'll talk about that at the end of this, or between us, Noel and I will. So this is just an input to 8 milliwatt times 4. This is not the prototype now, this is one of his downstream ones. Band pass filter. We want it to go really from just above 10G right the way up to the top of the band at 10.45 I think it is, I can't remember. 10.450 is the top of the band, isn't it? Yeah. An output stage, which we push moderately hard, but it's not that bad, and when we get 40 to 50 milliwatts out of the back of the unit. I'll come to that bit later. So here's an example of one that was put together. Now, if this one looks a little mouldy, you're quite right, because we put it on the bottom of the Isle of Wight, not far from Ventnor, a place called Stenbury, which is where we had the GB3IV repeater until the farmer decided he wanted a lot more money from us. And the object exercise was to see whether we could link what was then the planned group GB3 SQ, who recently got their NOV, thanks to Noel and his efforts. We wanted to link the two together. We weren't absolutely sure what kind of... We'd like to feed a bit more than just one dish at the GB3 SQ site, because there were a lot of people here on Sandbanks who were also interested in 10G. So I built this, which is based upon the two units. You'll have to look down underneath, because it's a bit under and over construction to get it all in this box. But it's all there. And I put a 800 milliwatt PA on the back end. and 17 dB horn. And this has had about 12 months in the salt water coming up the channel, and it looks like it. Despite all the efforts of sealing it all up and all the rest of it, when you took the lid off, it still looks pretty grim. But you can see the multiplier on the top, which is the interesting bit. You can also get an idea of what kind of construction that you could use. I mean, this is just a video in, an audio and power into the system. Okay.
Put it in front of the camera.
800 milliwatts. Well, let's say 500 milliwatts out of that by the time you've done the transition. 17 dB, allow for a few losses. So you're probably talking about 5, 10, about 20 watts ERP out of the back of that. And it can do this kind of distance. FM. So you need to have you need a reasonable sized dish at the other end. I think we used a 60 centimetre. But John Gohat down here, he could use Sky dishes, and I've got a sample of one of those there, and get really quite good performance out of it. The Comtech units do need a few mods, I'm afraid, but they're well documented on the websites. They don't have proper pre-emphasis in, and it is worth doing that. And even when you've done that, the low frequency performance of these devices is not wonderful. But I mean, it works, and you don't have to. It's not as though it's not going to work. But if you get more enthusiastic, you can find information on the website to improve those LF performances. Or in my case, I got lazy and I just put a clamp on it and sorted most of the problems out using that rather than dive into those boxes. We based the idea on the multiplier. We'll go back. Oh well, on the multiplier idea. But of course, it took a little while, didn't it? Think about it. You could replace it with one of the earlier ideas, like Charlie did with these pipe cap filters. I mean, so if you want to have a go yourself, the difficulty producing this board was not these parts, it was that filter in the middle. And I built one, this isn't an example, but this is just an example of a pipe cap. You can see a simple filter on the end of it. And they work quite well. The only problem is it doesn't cover the band. You've got to tune it up for the particular frequency that you're interested in. And we did quite well with it. I mean, it ran for quite a while on the south coast. We then subsequently added more 10G inputs here. We actually put a steerable Sky dish up. My location is up here, and I only needed about 50 milliwatts to get from here into the repeater input. So it was quite a useful input on the site. On one occasion, I noticed that I switched it on, and they were all DTMF control, and there was severe patterning on the on my signal. So I immediately went into clever technical mode and tried to work out what it was. Well, I suddenly realised it wasn't me at all. And when I moved the dish around another 3 or 4 more degrees, there was the incoming signal from London from GB3BH on 3 sems. And I subsequently realised that was a regular thing, much more often than you might think about it. And the reason why that worked, of course, is that those excellent LMBs that we had the talk on yesterday have got a really good noise performance. You put them right at the front end of a Sky dish like this, and you get an absolutely cracking receiver. You really do. So we used to see BH quite regularly from North London. So I think everybody was surprised. So a little bit of information about what we've got then. We wanted it really to have a project for people to build here today, to try and turn these out. We weren't quite sure on how much interest there is in the subject, but so if there's people who are interested, please do let us know. Then we'll know how many we want to put together and all the rest of it and build up. We think probably building it up as a if you're not that experienced in microwave stuff, probably not exactly a good idea. So we've had a conversation which we'll talk about in a moment, that we will probably put the boards together by some arrangement and sell the multiplier board as a going concern for you. It's all set up, and so you buy one of these. You're going to need a pick, And I've brought, well, I had some. There we are. There's the picks. So if anybody wants to a pick today to go into the boards, we've got them here. Apart from the cost of the pick, most of the funds intention is if you buy them, it'll go to Kevin's Oil the Works for supporting the club here. So I think they're probably something like £4 or £5 if anybody wants them. And I've got them here, and I can produce some more. Pick comes with a sheet, which I'll pass around just out of interest, but I've got some more for others. And you can see the top section is the A section, which covers all the repeater parts. And then there's the other matrix of 10 meg channels below that. There's the original article that John originally wrote, so some spare copies of that for those who have an interest. And we'll leave them around on the table probably for the coffee break. That's it. That was the idea. Shall we say a little bit about what we might do?
Yeah, so the first thing to say is that it's going to be in CQTV next edition, which will be out before the end of the year. So this as an article written up by Peter. We're then trying to, as Peter said, we're trying to decide what to do really. I guess the first question is there interest? We've bought for the shop, we've actually got semiconductor devices, or we've got a number of them. I think we've got 40 of the semiconductor devices, but we're trying to decide what to do, and we think maybe the best thing is to let Kevin build it up, and then we put it back into the shop and sell it as a complete unit. That's what we're kind of thinking at the moment. We're yeah. So.
Third-party sales for the Comtech.
Yeah, on the website already, one of the things I did when we took over the shop was to introduce that third-party shop window. That's just, there's only one set of things in there at the moment, but that was to try and act as a pointer to anything that may be of interest to ATVers. And actually the Comtech units are sold by Roy, GHz TV, and are in there. However, the more observant of you will perhaps realise that this is a good use for some of that 13 SEM equipment that you've got that actually might not be needed anymore.
Just plug the pick in?
Yeah, plug the pick in and off you go on 10 gigs. So we thought it was interesting, particularly as there's all the renewed interest in the LNBs. Because then, paired with the LNBs and this transmitter, you've got pretty much a 10 gig setup. And certainly BH, the North London repeater, it's quite a good signal on 10 gigs. There's a reason for that. It runs a reasonable amount of power, but Bob AVU in Lincoln, in Gainsborough, often sees 10 BH on 10 gigs. So it's quite surprising what happens on that band. I was going to drag out my PC. I took part back in the early, sort of about 2000. I took part in some of those Bob Platt tests across the North Sea, and I went down to Dungeness, which is off the bottom of Kent, and I worked PA zeros just standing on the beach, and full video, no problem at all. So 10 gigs is an amazing band. So is there any interest in this?
Good, we'll do it.
Okay, I think we'll sort something out then.
I mean, we're talking about 10G transmitter, but of course it doubles up as a source, and it covers the whole band, and you dial up that frequency, and that's what you get.
Could I just add a point that Andy Talbot has done an actual universal PIC controller that can control these Comtech modules. Oh, right. So if you want it as a source with a display, a rotary encoder, you could plug that in.
Yeah, so you don't really have to do this. You can move.
And I've got a sample of that in the car. I can show you how to drive that. And he's still got boards on his website, and he's still got the software, and we supply the displays, the 4x16 line displays for that purpose.
This is obviously a transmitter covering the transmit bands, but of course, if there was that much interest, we might consider whether we produce a 9G version if you wanted to use an injection into the LNBs. The LNBs are like all things, it's the receivers that trigger the digital interest, and it's the LNB performance that triggers the 10G interest. Yeah. It really is quite straightforward to get going. So don't worry about 10G, just have a go.
So, talking about